Well, good morning or good afternoon or potentially good evening if you're in Europe or Asia. And thanks very much, everybody, for attending. Thanks very much. We've actually had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of folks, almost 1,000 out to these first three expert panel webinars. So thank you very much for attending. The first one that we did was about 4 or 5 weeks ago, coping with COVID. And for those of you who didn't attend, the main takeaway from that was communication. You couldn't communicate enough. And one of the things that Anthony brought forward and Ed sort of backed up on was that managing miscommunication as well was really important, and the false information that was out there. And I'll introduce all the panelists in just a second, everybody. The second webinar was on the great return, more than just a flip of a switch. And a couple nights ago, actually on the news in Canada, evening news, they actually were using that line, that's more than a flip of the switch. And we talked about not just the need for training everybody on PPE and social distancing and the procedures within the facility, but also the need for everybody 24/7 to be looking after themselves. And that included, the not making any mistakes, the need for training, the personal commitment, and certainly, more of an issue perhaps in some parts of the world since they've never really gone beyond the four walls of the workplace. And so that led us into this one, which is we've all done a lot more remotely because of the social distancing and the isolation, the personal isolation. So what about, training in the future? How much of it can we do remotely? And can we even look at things like behavioral change, human factors, things like ethics, diversity, that were typically thought to be solely the domain of the classroom, had to be done in person with an instructor, group participation, and so on. So we have some expert panelists with us who can talk about all of that, and not just in theory, but also from experience and what they've done so far. Back again from Procter & Gamble is Anthony I'm nervous about getting this wrong. Panapinto, everybody. And Anthony has been with P&G for 27 years, but he's been, if you will, the point guard or the quarterback or the go-to person at P&G for, this is now his 7th pandemic. He's been through 6 of them before, and Anthony brings a tremendous amount of perspective on that for all of us. We also have Ed Stevens, and Ed works with ABB, and he has responsibilities coordinating training, and it depends on where you look on their website, 98 or 103 countries. So let's just leave it with 100 countries that Ed has, responsibility organizing training with. New panelist with us today is Viviana Lapre, and she's from EDPR. They're an energy company, a lot of renewable energy, 700, I think, employees, although not all of them working right now, of course. But and Viviana, just by the nature of their work, they've had a lot of experience with remote learning, including behavioral human factors. So very happy to have you with us today, Viviana. Thanks for making the time. I know you've been super busy. And David Bianca from Epiroc, and David is also on our expert panel in Europe. They have operations in 4 continents, I believe, but they make mining equipment. So everywhere there is above ground, underground mining in the world, there will be Epiroc service technicians. So David, I don't know how many countries that is, but could be almost as many as Anthony's looking after there with P&G, or at over 100. And I didn't forget you, Tag, this time. Tag Matthews is our Vice President of Business Development, and Tag has been working with 50 or 60 different health and safety environmental leaders in North America with sort of focus groups to talk with all of them. So Tag's job here, if you will, is to try to see just how all of this compares or reflects with our expert panelists, or how what our expert panelists are saying compares with sort of the general feeling out there. So again, thank you all very, very much for attending. And Anthony, again, I always sort of throw this on you, and I hate to sort of do it, but you've been through 6 pandemics before. This is the 7th. So maybe just before we get into the specifics of the training, in general, do people, do companies, do corporations learn and progress through these things, or do they basically just react and survive, and then when things have settled down, just sort of go back? I mean, if you could just give us how optimistic should we be that we can take advantage of some of these opportunities?
Yeah, and thanks for inviting me again. Really appreciate talking to folks. So, in the circles I travel in with various companies and various EH&S professionals, I think in general we all learn from these cases. Certainly, I have over the course of years. We always come out of it with a better pandemic plan, but then there's this gap of a few years, and every pandemic's a little different. This one is tremendously different. And the thing I put my finger on with everybody I talk to is the infodemic is worse than the pandemic. And that's been really a challenge. Just the amount, if you think about, there's an estimated 250,000 websites dedicated to COVID. And since the month of February, we're talking 57,000, in most cases, not peer-reviewed scientific publications, letters to editors, models, all sorts of things being published in journals, opinion statements, and it's just really a challenge to stay ahead of that curve. And I believe as EH&S professionals, the most important thing that we can do for our organizations is be a source of good information and a good communicator. And that's why we really, left I've left my Teams open now for a few months. Anybody can contact me 24/7. We do weekly grand rounds with people, but we will all learn from this. But I think there's less technical learning and more about how to stay agile with the changing information that's out there. And then finally, I think we're all thinking of how do we do our daily routine work differently because of the challenges that are going to be persistent in terms of travel, in terms of access to facilities around the world. And so this is a timely conversation to have.
Yeah. Oh, well, Anthony, thank you very much, because a couple of days ago with the European Asian webinar, David Bianco said something that I'm actually going to try to get it into the training program, David, but there's sort of like 2 levels, right? There's the surface level, like you said, and then there's the deeper level. What do people really do more at that cultural, what's your behavior when nobody's watching? That I don't want to get into the whole mantra there, but just there really are 2 levels, and we're not going to succeed if we don't get to that second level. So there's a bit of hope, Anthony, obviously, right? But like you've said to me before, a lot of the times you've told them, I'll tell you again, and then when it's over, I'll tell you I told you so, right? So, Ed, over to you, if I could. And I should probably have just a quick look at my notes here, Ed, so I make sure that I get your question right instead of me ad-libbing the question and then you going, well, that's great. Too bad you didn't ask me the one you were supposed to. 103 countries with many remote workers. So distance learning is not really something new for ABB, but do you see a window opening? And if so, how are you planning on trying to maximize or exploit the potential? So take it away.
Well, to answer your question, there's several ways you can look at that. COVID, as you can imagine, for a lot of manufacturing facilities and people that are still in the business up and operating, we're not operating at the same levels that we were this time last year, and for many different reasons. Well, but then there's other businesses in the food industry, Amazon, and those that are at max capacity, and they're not seeing much of a decline in product. But for us, cost is important. So anytime you do face-to-face training, and you have to have people come together remotely from remote locations into a central location and do training, there's a cost associated with that. And there's a lot of positive things that come with those face-to-face training experiences that they have. One of the things when we take a look at virtual training, the positive things around virtual training is one, we're not asking employees or supervisors or managers to travel, so they're not being exposed to the risks that come with traveling right now. Also, we create a little bit more flexibility by putting these virtual training packages together. Instead of doing a full day training on some of our leadership and some of our health and safety type training mod that we deliver, we're breaking those up into smaller bites. And so that creates some flexibility for our managers and our supervisors and our employees, even at that matter. But one thing you have to remember, face-to-face, the way you train face-to-face is much different than the way you train via a webinar. A webinar, like a voice-over training, and then virtual is a whole nother animal. So how do you, in virtual training, how do you bring those same face-to-face experiences that you would have at a central location via Skype or internet or what we're doing right now? And one of the things that a lot of people forget about is that the employees on the receiving end, those that are participating in the virtual training, you're not burning calories. And so for them to sit there more than an hour to 2 hours, you start to get into 3 hours, you're starting to get into this fatigue factor, even though you're moving around or you'll take some breaks. But sitting in a virtual setting is much different. Virtual really focuses on a lot of storytelling. You have to create new ways to engage the employee. But we're getting really started in this. We're starting to move a lot more programs to the virtual setting, and we're finding out that, hey, for a long time there's been a lot of tools and resources available. They've been creating these experiences for a long time. We have just not been as acceptable to those type of trainings. But now with COVID, it's making everybody say, hey, what training available techniques do we have, and how do we really bring that engagement to the remote worker and give them experiences that are as powerful or as rewarding as the face-to-face? And so, it's different, but it's going to be proven to be very effective moving forward.
Well, Ed, I know you've had experience with 300-400 people you've done
Yeah.
some of this with already. So we'll come back to you and get you to talk a bit about some of the tangible takeaways from that. I know some of the stuff's hard to put a number on, like people's willingness to intervene, cultural, positive, things like that. I know, but we can certainly come back to that because I know you've had some direct experience with it. I don't know if as much maybe as you've had, Viviana. I know you've had a lot of this, and again, my brother who's in charge of all client services sort of said, Larry, it'd be great if we could get Viviana on here because she's done a lot of this already. So she can come from a bit more of a hands-on practicality perspective versus versus theory. And Viviana, that's what I think so much the value of these expert panel series is it's not, I don't know how much, there's lots of theory out there. I think a lot of people want to hear about, talk to me about where the rubber meets the road, people, that's, so if you could just maybe back up a bit though, Viviana, and sort of talk about, kind of where a logical starting spot would be for you guys when you got involved with this or when you got involved, and then take a few minutes and sort of tell us a bit about your journey so far.
Sure. Well, first, thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here and share our experience. Of course, at EDPR, when we talk about behavior, we think about Safestart. So 3 years ago, before we had Safestart in our world, over 40% of our incidents came from decisions that our employees were making. So we saw the opportunity with you guys and started implementing the program. And some of the things that we did, it's about, and what you talk about through the training is taking Safestart home. So when you can get your employees and your technicians to get this training and take it back home, everybody love about talking about themselves, right? So when they have the opportunity to share stories about home, it's like those behaviors, I can bring it from home to work. After we did that, then we were able to redefine the Safestart training and all the behavior into what we do. Our biggest risk in the energy sector are falls and electricity. So working about electricity, around electricity. So that's very important to us to keep the employees engaged on what they're doing. So now if we put COVID into the equation, it's really hard to keep them engaged, to keep their mind in what they're actually doing, the work they're performing on, and not what's going on around the world.
Right. Yeah.
So,
I think I'm at, and we challenge for everybody too. I think we could hopefully it'll come back a bit to that just at the end. We have a question from the audience, at least on that already. We did last time, but just with all the COVID distraction, what about the electricity? What about the falling from heights? What about the, safety 101 hazards that haven't gone away, like driving to the workplace, only listening to the news and not paying attention to the road, all of those things. Teg, just before I go to David and ask David about what they're doing, and I'm aware of some of the plans because we're working with them, and we're shooting some of it at one of their facilities in Texas. But what have you heard in terms of companies out there, Teg, seizing? I don't want to say carpe diem here, seizing the day, but there's a lot of opportunities for remote learning that have opened. Like, I think people are more receptive now, but I haven't talked to nearly as many people as you have. So give us, if you can, word on the street there.
Yeah, sure. So so if you look at, I want to circle back to something that Anthony said right at the beginning. A lot of organizations have looked at, they've kind of looked at their processes initially and how they apply it in this very strange situation. But what a lot of organizations are seeing is that they're going very much through a learning kind of process, and how to inform people remotely, how to change their behavior remotely, how do we reinforce, how do we get their engagement, all these points that Ed and Viviana made. But actually, a lot of organizations feel they're going to be better when they come through it, right? It's that, we're on a learning curve. What can we learn? And you're hearing, there's been an evolution in that thought from the initial piece, which was dealing with the immediate problem in front of us, to it's almost becoming more of a strategic kind of thinking. And we've definitely seen that kind of evolve over the last sort of like 6 to 8 kind of weeks. The other thing that Anthony said that resonates is the info source piece and the need to be agile, right? So the information that we're getting is changing. I was on a call earlier on this morning where there's been a subtle change, I was told, I haven't seen it, but a subtle change in the CDC recommendation on stuff. So the agility for organizations to react and what they do for how we act with this sort of stuff is very, very prevalent. And then the stuff that Ed was talking about, the piece about engagement, the size of the bites, I think was the phrase that you used, Ed. That's critical when you're getting that engagement. The medium that we're using is very, very different. That some organizations, frankly, have not really made that mental jump yet, that training people virtually and training people in their classroom are very different things, right? And I've been involved in conversations where people are basically trying to lift things and basically reproduce classroom training in a virtual environment, and it's a different kind of problem, right? So some organizations in their approach have been less sophisticated than that. And the other thing I want to come back to, two other things, the storytelling piece, a lot of organizations have understood how powerful that is right now. And also the evaluation of the training, how are we evaluating, we're developing these new systems for a lot of organizations, how are we capturing that data to make sure it's as effective as it can be? They seem to be a lot of the learns that are coming out.
Okay, well, thanks, Ted. Well done. I mean, it certainly does help when you get to make notes. That's all I'm thinking, right? I try to do all this. Don't make any notes, Larry. You look like you're disengaging. And I'm like, well, you should try keeping all of it in your head. You want to talk about disengagement, but the point you made, though, Ted, about I'm not trying to apply. This article was published in OH&S magazine in the United States last June, education, skill development, and behavior change. But it's one thing to teach somebody, how the pedals work, the turn indicator, the lights on your car. In order to parallel park, you got to practice. That's a skill. How long you need to practice depends a bit, I guess, on your hand-eye coordination and stuff, but you won't be able to parallel park just reading a book. And then there's behavior change, getting your spouse to drive his or her car differently. Perhaps you've changed. Did you end up sleeping in the car, or were you just on the couch, right? So this is sort of what I'm getting at. Like we know we can, if we want to train somebody and what a P-trap valve is, we can do that distance learning, no problem. Pythagorean's theorem, whatever you want, education. Is the skill development, is the behavioral change possible, though, and is that window open for us? So again, David, I'm not going to wing it. I'm going to ask you the question the way I set it out. So you've got to, David, you also have operations in Sweden, which is a different story for sure. I've been there with you, I know. On the other hand, great people to work with there in Sweden. I know you're planning on doing remote training, behavioral training, because like I said, we're filming some of it at your facilities. But can you sort of just talk overall about how you've like with people all over the world, like you have, just give us a start from there, if you could, David, a bit, and then maybe move into the sort of the specifics of what you're dealing with, daily, weekly now.
Sure. Thank you, Larry, and the invite and the team here. First of all, I'm involved on several levels, being a divisional safety, health, environmental, and quality manager, and also project manager for implementing Safestart worldwide within Epiroc over the next 3 years. We've had a little bit of a pause right now for obvious reasons. We're headquartered out of Sweden, and we've had a couple of things that there have been set up as a preparation. When we became a company, we spun off of Atlas Copco 2 years ago. They had started something called a competence portal, which had a lot of e-learning. And so that has been a reservoir to pick from. But we also have what's called Epiroc University, which is a much more formal and forward-looking way for people to gain skills, personal skills, managerial skills, technical skills, that has been starting its journey in the last year and a half. So in that regard, we're kind of merging into traffic a bit, as opposed to starting from scratch, which is a good thing. But at the same time, COVID, of course, is a crisis. And if there's a symbol in Chinese for crisis. And if you split the two symbols, it's danger and opportunity. And this is exactly what this represents for us. The thing about training, and to me, training and learning are two different things. Training is the act of doing the activity, and learning is what you get out of it. And so I always think of the two E's in training, right? Engagement and effectiveness. every quality standard, whether it's a safety standard, an ISO standard for environmental, a quality standard, they all have a place in training that says measure the effectiveness of training. Because basically the bottom line is, if it's not effective, even though you check the box, you didn't really accomplish anything. So the key here in my mind has been to step back a bit and to think through how we're going to make this work effectively. Because Safestart is probably the most powerful live on training you can do interactively with human beings. I've seen people who were, you know, good shop floor guys, but man, they hated training, and you know, they really found it hard to even bother with anything. Man, and these guys are pumped to come to the next module of training. And so for me to let go of doing that kind of training for a web-based is very difficult, even though I know there's new tools getting developed and they're helpful. But I will tell you that if you can't do your training, in my mind, with seeing the people who are there and them seeing you, and you're doing it audio only, that's like talking into a wall. Meetings are the same way. It's like, is anybody out there? You know, it's like Pink Floyd. You know, it's like, hello. And so we're kind of taking a little bit of we're kind of trying to understand how we can do it well from a behavioral standpoint. How can we get the effectiveness out of it? And we're trying to learn that through doing some webinars and trying what works with those before we do it with hard training. But we do now deliver some packages for the you know, kind of the training that's very easy to just do and absorb some rules and regulations and things like that. But when it comes to these other things that are more behavioral based, I think we got to recognize one major thing. People's lives have changed in a lot of ways. I mean, now people are at home working, and their whole world of how they live and operate and work on their computer and interact is totally different. You know, their ability to be available for a meeting at 2 p.m. might be very different because of a issue with the kids in their school because they're sitting at home. So we got to have a lot more flexibility in our training too. So there's a lot of dynamics here, and we want to kind of incrementally look at the best way to do this to be effective. Even though we have the tools, we want to leverage them appropriately.
Okay. Well, David, thank you. And you know, I mean, like I said, I spent my career in person training, but I've also, you know, been able, you can only do so much in person. So you've got to be able to make stuff. You've got to be able to make stuff, you know, whether it's, you know, videos, PowerPoints, things, you know, that can transfer to more people. But you know, you can go and watch the roll. Not to pick on you because you've got a guitar and a banjo behind you, but you can watch Keith and Mick, the Rolling Stones, play for 2 hours and 45 minutes, and it's not a problem at all. But to watch them on video for an hour is a long hour, right? And I think that was one of the things that Ed was saying, that we were all saying it's got to be flexible, but it's also what you're doing has to be proportional to the medium that you are transferring it in, right? And so, you know, you can sit down with somebody and talk all day long, but to talk all day long on the phone, like you said, without being able to see them is dreary. So anyhow, Anthony, didn't mean to leave you out there you set the stage for all of us, and then and we've all been following along from your lead. But if you could, maybe just a bit of specific plans that there are, if any. I know I've talked to you a bit about what P&G was going to do to sort of seize the day here, or you know, push the opening a bit further. But I know, and we talked for a while, but I can't remember everything. So just whatever. Yeah, take it from the top,
Sure.
however you'd like, Anthony.
So yeah, I think, you know, I'd break this into 3 elements that we're really looking at that give us hope that we actually can, you know, come to a better place. And so as Ed and David and Viviana said, we talk about remote learning and really how to deliver content better, faster, just in time, from the factory floor to our EH&S leaders, to our business leaders and our operations leaders that need to set, be role models in safety, health, and environment. And so we're really taking a look at all that training. The second piece is around wearable technology. So whether that's, things like Augmentalus or RealWear that let us deliver content directly to the worker, through an apparatus, or gather data that informs the worker. So proximity detection as an example. So we've been slow to develop that for many, many reasons. But I think the bright spot in this is that it may advance us faster because now there's a real provocative reason to do it. And then the whole space of apps. And so, we just launched an application around helping people who have been developing these habits over in the manufacturing sites, which have remained open, developing those habits, those good COVID safety habits, social distancing, hand washing, and reinforcing that through basically what amounts to an app containing certs that trigger them. We've actually linked that to GIS so we can see how our factories around the world are responding to those behavior-based queries and see who might need a little bit more help or a little bit more training as reinforcement. And then I think we have this whole other group of people which we're working on, which is those folks, as David alluded to, who've been hanging out at home, doing work from home, dealing with kids and conference calls and trying to figure this all out. Well, we have yet to get them back fully into the workplace and in the habit of practicing hand washing and masks. And, there's very few people in my building today, but I already had to do a behavior-based safety reinforcement because some contractors got a little too close and personal during breakfast. So we had a little discussion about what 6 feet is and why 6 feet is important. So I think that's a whole nother group that we're working on. And what we're really trying to do with them is push videos from leadership, showing leaders practicing social distancing. We've done hand washing videos. And if they're not practicing those behaviors at home while they're socially isolated due to lockdown, we're preparing them to come back to a very different workplace. And so we're building that skill in those people, and in our plants where we've been practicing this, we're really trying to reinforce it so complacency doesn't creep in. There's this whole piece of denial, which I still find with friends who haven't been in the workplace, that don't quite get it, and that concerns me because I certainly don't want to see a resurgence of cases that puts us 2 steps back as we enter the fall or enter the next flu season. So I hope that helps with what we've been up to, and in terms of looking at all the tools that are available to help people adjust to the new workplace.
No, Anthony, thank you so much. And for those of you, when you said the certs, the apps, critical error reduction techniques, it's always nice for me to hear that P&G is 1 step ahead of us with Safestart all the time. They've been at it for a long time, and it's not like all the good ideas we've had them all. Like, a lot of the good ideas have come from our customers.
Well, Larry, I got some inspiration. I read your book this weekend, and I got some new ideas. So thank you. I'll expect a signature on this when I do see you.
Thank you so, Anthony. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And as you can see, everybody, he looks very well rested, doesn't he? So if you're having trouble sleeping, that book fits you right up, right there. There's certainly a lot of opportunities. The thing that really struck me yesterday at this gym, it's a fairly sophisticated gym. They give you a mask when you go there, a spray bottle, a wipe. But there's not what you said a couple of days ago, David, the deeper level. You've got people there having a conversation with the person they're working out with. And I don't know if they're roommates, they're or partners, whatever, but one of them has the mask on his throat and the other one is wearing it properly. And they are like not even 3 feet apart from each other. And then there are other people that are wearing gloves and wiping everything down, including spraying some of the air where they're breathing. And then we've got other people who aren't wearing anything at all. Great, big, huge guys, by the way, who nobody even wants to say anything to. And so there's this whole gambit all over this. And I'm just looking at it, and all I thought about, Anthony, was just the conversations that you and I have had about denial, which then made me think about what you said 2 days ago, David, which is this, there's this surface level. The gym has to show everybody on TV that they have proper social distancing practices and protocols. And yet you go to the gym and it's all over the map, from you wouldn't think there was anything at all to why are all these people wearing masks and gloves and spraying everything down. So I think, Tag, I think I've got to come back to you right now. I'm not sure if I got the order right or not, but if you can, what in general are folks out there looking forward to or hoping for in terms of distance learning? And I know I've got to come back to Ed on, because he's got some plans on that as well too. But what do they have? In general, are people trying to seize the day here, Tag?
It's a really difficult question. It comes back to what sort of, the short answer is yes. It's how sophisticated they are in their approach, right? A lot of organizations have taken a hearts and minds kind of approach to this, right? So that they've been, so we've talked during these calls about how organizations' communication has got much better, that the leadership engagement has been seen better. Organizations have seen improvements in safety performance. I think it was Ed who was talking about it earlier on about, how the fear effectively, or the concern has focused the mind, right? That they've extended that to a certain extent to the way they're thinking of how do we support people at home. There's a huge awareness about the fact that this exposure is not just in the workplace. It literally exists everywhere, from the gas station to when you do your shopping for the week, to your daughter sort of playing with her friends or hanging out, to hanging out with the grandparents. It's very wide, right? So then things like such as, it brings a mental fatigue with it. Habits are so important. They're trying to sort of bring all that stuff together. But then you get organizations that have been very sophisticated and kind of get that message across, and others have been more traditional and more of a tell kind of way. And it comes back to this conversation that we're having now around behavioral change. And how do we enforce and how do we support that behavioral change? And some organizations have been quite sophisticated in that, and others have been more of a kind of a push and tell kind of way of doing with it. And something that Viviana said earlier on, not only are we dealing with these situations where, these exposures still exist in our workplace, but there's also, there can be a fatigue around the message too, right? If you look at the news, all we hear about is COVID, COVID, COVID. My wife said to me this morning, I know I'm not allowed to quote this stuff, but she goes, I'm bored of it now. I'm bored of it, right? I'm bored of hearing about it. And, and as we go into this sort of next stage, that's our problem really. How do we, to Anthony's point, how do we stop that denial? How do we make sure these people carry on doing what they need to do? It's all part of the issue. And a lot of organizations are struggling with it.
No, I think we can all relate to what your wife's saying too, because by the time the election actually rolls around, I'm so sick of listening to all of it, I barely feel like voting. And I'm sure I'm not the only one, right? It's just too much, BS, too much whatever, and, enough already, right? And we are human beings with an attention span, whether we like it or not. There is a finite capacity for doom and gloom. And we do have a few self-defense mechanisms that kick in when, there is so much of that, like grief in your life and problems, that, you do tend to build internal kind of walls to become resilient, right? Ed, I think I'm actually, if I look at my notes, I think I'm supposed to ask Viviana the next question here, and then I'll come right back to you. Viviana, do you have any special distance learning or remote delivery plans specifically aimed at COVID? I'm not talking about plans that are compensating for COVID in terms of training. I'm talking about training. If you've got any remote delivery training plans for dealing with COVID, social distancing, you know, personal habits and skills. That's what I found yesterday at the gym. I mean, I am bought in. I am trying to do the right thing, and I am not an airtight mechanism with all of this new stuff. Just like you were saying, Anthony. It's so, and Ed, you know, like it's easy to make little mistakes with this stuff because it's not all totally ingrained yet. Anyhow, Viviana, take it away if you would.
Yeah. So the main thing, when everything started, we used Teams, which is a Microsoft tool like Zoom, Skype. So on Teams, we created a page with overflow of communication. We have different platforms. We have North America, Mexico, we have North America, Europe. So every platform has created a plan. And then we have contractors that work with us. So we have shared those plans as well. So that overflow of communication, open chat, so that technicians and employees can ask questions and everybody will see it. So kind of like a blog of information that has been very transparent and, like I said, over communicating with all employees. Also, we have daily and weekly calls with operation managers, with the technicians to deal on a case-by-case basis if anything comes up on COVID issues.
Okay. And how, I don't know, how many, did you do it all yourself? Did you do, I mean, like for our folks listening, what sort of resources or help, you know,
Yeah.
I deploy, you know, yes.
So, to keep everything realistic, we don't do everything in the corporate office, right? Because we have to maintain that realistic vision of people working in the field and us. So we created a task force, which included ops managers, technicians, high voltage people, operation, construction, and then management. So with the task force, we created this operating plan. And then, of course, applying all CDC guidelines, we came up with all the guidelines for all employees to follow.
Okay. All right. Very good. Ed, sorry for leaving you in the wings so long. How about you, ABB, and how are you planning on dealing with the COVID training issue for both in-plant and field services? So, I mean, that's the formal question there, Ed, but you can, you know, whatever you want, take it away.
Well, before I answer that question, I wanted to make a comment about your gym experience. And for those that are listening in, I'm taking you back to last week because we had a big discussion about the reopening and the experiences. And, you know, same with Anthony and David and Viviane, we are setting a presence for our employees within our facilities of what we think good looks like, right? And so we encourage our employees as they go out into the community to take a look at what we're doing within our facilities and observe what the other restaurants, gyms, haircutting salons, whatever, what are they doing to keep you safe, your family safe, and keep themselves safe, and compare notes. And you're still getting a lot of stories that are just like what you just described. You got some people wearing masks, you got some people not wearing masks, you got some people just not doing anything. And I wanted to tell you an experience that I just went through last week. I live in Orlando, Florida, for those that don't know that. And they just opened the boardwalk for Universal Studios, and they also just opened the boardwalk for Disney Springs. And so my family, I have a daughter that has a suppressed autoimmune, and then we have some underlying conditions with our children. And so my son and I and my wife, we decided we were going to go to the Universal Studios. And when we pulled into the parking lot, you could only park in a slot, and then they had a cone in the slot next to it, and then you could park in the next slot. So they made social distancing happen just by parking in the parking lots. From there, we got out of our car, and they had people navigating the participants in making sure that you kept social distancing as you moved across the parking lot to the escalators that take you into the Universal Studio Boardwalk. As you were keeping your social distance, you came up on these workers. These workers had PPE on, they had face shields, and the first thing they do is they take your temperature check. Now, the whole time along the way, they tell you if you have a temperature above 100.4, you and your entire party would be escorted or asked to go speak or visit with some medical volunteers that they have to ask you some questions about why somebody in your party has a temperature. So once you get your temperature checked, everybody has to use hand sanitizer, and then you move on into the park. And in the park, they make sure that if anybody brought their mask down around their chin, they would tell you, they would point at your mask, and they would police making sure that you keep your face coverings on. And they made sure that they kept people following the social distancing guidelines set out by the CDC. The entire experience was extremely awesome. We felt comfortable as a family. The food, it was you didn't touch the food. It was they would bring it out into these queues, and you weigh the order. You could order on the app. It was just a really wonderful experience. And we went back again the next day. When we went to Disney Springs, we experienced the exact same experience. So that's setting the stage of what good looks like as people start to navigate out of their homes into the restaurants and into the movie theater, so to speak, and things like that. So I personally believe the experiences like you had, Larry, in the gym are not going to last much longer, because companies like Disney and Universal and the companies that we work for is raising the bar when it comes to how we're going to manage COVID moving forward in the future. And that's going to create an expectation that's going to become mandatory by people within our organization. So I just wanted to make that comment because I just experienced that last week, and I'm like, wow, I was really impressed with how they manage that. So that's a great indicator that, there's a lot of things we can do with COVID to keep people safe and feeling good about their surroundings moving forward. And I wanted to share that experience with you guys. Now, to answer your question, Safestart has this remote worker application, and it's a voice over application. And we've been using that for several years, even before COVID. And one of the things that we did to make that effective is that we would require our service technicians to come in for face-to-face for units 1 and 2, and then they would do 3, 4, and 5 remotely. Now that we're looking at COVID, where we can't bring them in out of the field, we're looking at how do we do that virtually? Do we just let them do units 1 through 5 with the voiceover, with the remote application, and then we have calls with them before they start unit 1, and turn the camera on just like what we're doing here and say, hey, we would like for you to do unit 1 sometime this week. Here's what you're going to experience in unit 1. Here's the information behind that. Here's what self-triggering is about, and have those conversations via video about what their experience is going to be when they do the unit 1 application, when they do the unit 2. It doesn't take much to have that 15-minute or even that 30-minute dialogue before they do units 1 through 5 with a remote worker. And we've done that for a long time. A couple hundred people have gone through this. We've had remote workers call in via web calls. And so as we're doing the application or we're doing the training, they're on a web call watching the instructor. Another thing we're looking at is if you want to just talk about Safestart in the PowerPoint presentations, you can embed videos in there. So I could facilitate the Safestart program just like if I was in front of an audience, and I can create that video clip as me facilitating that, and then it ties right into the videos that you do, Larry, and some of the learning experience. So there's a lot of really different ways to do that and be effective with the remote worker.
Oh, okay. Excellent, excellent stuff. Now here, Tag, I'm going to throw you under the bus because Ed said so many things that I wanted to come back on to touch on. And now I can't remember one of them. But well,
I got too windy.
No. But the one thing that really keeps sticking out in my head about this, but I don't want to keep harping on it, is what David said about this deeper level. And even if you get everybody on the surface at Disneyland and Universal and the gyms of whatever, saying, doing and looking and showing the right things, if on the second level, the people on a personal basis are not doing it, they're not washing their hands, they're not doing that stuff, I don't know whether we'll win the war. That's all. I think your comment about that second level, David, though, it's really resonated with me for sure. Anyhow, Teg, what do you think in terms of some of the things that Ed was saying there? The fact that you don't just do, like, there are activities, that there is dialogue, that you share stories, that you don't just try to leave this as some sort of electronic textbook. I think that's crucial in this. But I'd also like to hear, a bit about, from you, Tag, and also from Ed and Viviana and David, a bit about, just how it's gone practically too. But take it away, Tag.
Right. So I'll say, I'll say a couple of things. All right. The first thing is that when Ed said, what good looks like. Well, let me start from a different point. Right. So I'm going to talk about the power of culture actually for a minute. Right. And I don't know about other people who are listening, but I've been a contractor, right, in my time, and a construction contractor. And and you adopt and adapt to the standard that you see around you, right? So to Ed's point about what good looks like, if everyone is consistent, you adjust to that kind of standard. So to your comment about using masks or not using masks, if I walk into a gym and everyone's using a mask, I'm going to feel a bit stupid if I don't. Right. So I'm gonna adopt and adapt to that. Now, of course, from a leadership perspective, from a messaging perspective, we have to make sure we set and adhere to those standards. And the quote that I've been using for the last couple of years on this is, the standard we walk past is the standard we accept. Right. So from a leadership perspective, from a supervisory perspective, practical sense in the workplace, if we make sure those things are being reinforced, then culture becomes our friend in that example. The other thing that Ed said, and it's something that these groups that I've been running with organizations, some have been Safestart clients, a lot have not been Safestart clients. But the one thing that, and I'm almost reluctant to say this, but the one thing that has come out has been the organizations that have been through Safestart, they've said very, very clearly that refreshing those skills, refreshing those pieces of information from a pure practical perspective has been hugely powerful for them as organizations. And it's given them a communication channel to and a hook effectively to enable that message to come through. And it's been very, very strong. And of course, with the storytelling piece that you talked about, Larry, and Ed talked about, that's a very, very strong part of that, messaging and tool in that sense.
Okay, well, thanks, Ted. David, if I could, I'd like to get to you, and then there's a couple questions from the audience. I mean, it's not like we have to land right on the stroke of 12, but we do want to try to keep it to about an hour if we could. So in terms of Epiroc, I know part of what you're doing is with COVID certs and complacency drift. As I said before, we're shooting some of the anticipating error rate your state, contact conversations at your plant. And I did promise, Ken Tootin isn't with us this week, everybody from Crown Cork and Seal, but I told him I definitely, take up his, or whatever, about the deliberate practice, that Ken's always been talking about, how you want skills to improve quickly and assuredly, Larry. You need to put them into, some form of deliberate practice, just like a musical instrument, just like a language, anything else. You've got to have deliberate practice. So I know you've got some plans around that, but you've also got some challenges all over the world, David. So take a few minutes, if you would, and just sort of talk about what you're planning to do, and maybe give us the size of the hill you're trying to climb too.
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, we're in the midst of our implementation. So we have pretty much the US, most locations have implemented Safestart, some in South America, some in Sweden, but the rest is going to be on the journey. But there are ways to integrate the behavioral aspects, which often come through Safestart, to COVID. Example, wearing a mask has to do with line of fire. I mean, that's really what the issue is. So we correlate the line of fire message from the card to the mask, using the mask that you basically are trying to remove the line of fire of these invisible virus elements that are out there. So people are starting to, even if they haven't known Safestart per se and had the training, they definitely are starting to hear some of those words and some of those ideas. So the COVID situation at the end of the day is about a virus and about our reaction and behavior towards it, or not towards it, depending who's going to the gym, I guess. So we find that we really need to take those things, and Mind Not on Task is another area where you're not thinking about it because you can't see it. So it presents a different challenge. I mean, to have guys who are welders be complacent about weld sparks is one thing, because that's their world and they can see it and other people can see it. But this one's a new one to them. It's like, I can't see it. It's there. It's like carbon monoxide, right? You have to gear yourself for something. So that's all about anticipation, to anticipate that it could be there, it might be there, and what would be the harm, what would be the situation you would have to potentially deal with when that happens. And so we basically say, you want to go home every day safe from the work you've done, maybe a little more tired every day. That's always the message we reinforce. So now it's, and you don't want to bring those germs home. You don't want to bring a virus home. You don't want to have that contact. You're doing this for those around you. You're doing this for your family. Frankly, I'd like to see an international approach on something that says something as simple as, hey, those of you out there that have autoimmune deficiencies, who have health issues, maybe they should wear like a green ribbon or something. That way you're just basically sending a message to your fellow human beings. Hey, I have a concern, so please, I'll try to do my space and whatever, so we can communicate that that's out there, that's there. And those are really the people who are at risk the most with this situation. That's a fact. That's a statistical fact. So I think we've got to mature, because the truth is, when Ed said right at the beginning, it's the information is the virus. That is the truth. The difference between this and 1968's Hong Kong flu is the internet and 7x24 cable. Those are the two major differences that exist, because they have created a fluster and all sorts of fear, and we need to focus where fear is real. And those people who are really the risk factors, those shouldn't be the people coming back to work. They should be working from home. Those in the public sector that have it. We need to respect those, and those are really where I think we can really help people gain a proper perspective about this. And that training or learning, to me, is the most important thing we could bring to the table, not just as professionals, but as human beings.
Okay, well, David, thank you very much for that. And just a couple minutes, Anthony, in terms of this question from the audience came in. I love the term infodemic. I believe it's a very true statement. Question: in 5 to 10 years, what do you think our rear view perspective will be? Did we do the best with what we knew? Could we have done more? Did we overreact, underreact? And it's maybe start with Anthony. So
that's a tough one.
No kidding, no kidding.
You know, the point that I make to people, because I get this question a lot, is, you know, was it necessary nationally in the United States, for example, to go into such extreme measures countrywide? And you know, I think you operate, I'm giving people, Dr. Fauci and others, the benefit of the doubt, and saying, look, with what they knew back then, perhaps it was right, perhaps it was wrong. You know, the thing is again, what are we doing today? Because I get the common question, when is de-escalation going to happen? So I'm looking at the 4 counties, and I'm speaking to the U.S. I'm looking at the 4 counties surrounding each of my facilities in the U.S. and looking at hospitalizations and case counts and really doing, if you will, contact tracing at the core of epidemiology. So what is the community doing that puts our people, our families, our workers at risk? And, you know, there are places that are severely impacted and severely not. But I remind, you know, it only takes one person to drive on into your town who's infected, and they can do a lot of damage, a la what happened in South Korea in the nightclubs a few weeks ago when they reopened the nightclubs. One 29-year-old gentleman went into 5 nightclubs, 1,500 people, 54 cases, and got all the nightclubs shut back down. So I remind people that one individual can make a significant impact. So I think there will be heroes and there will be zeros as we look back on this. I'm not sure I'm ready to make a judgment on who are going to be called the heroes and who are going to be called the zeros.
Okay, I'm not, and I'm not sure either. I mean, there's a part of me that really wants to go with what you were saying, Ed, and that is, you know, the people and the social consciousness will force, just like you force establishments to keep a clean restroom, or, you know, eventually you've got no customers, right? You know, we won't put up with it. Or it could go the other way, which is, you know, it's all a big facade and everybody pretends, but nobody's really doing anything. And then there's another huge rebound. So, if there's one thing that Anthony's imparted on me, you know, definitively, that is that if, you know, if people don't practice social distancing and we don't do what we need to do, there will be a rebound. It's not like if there will be one. So the next expert panel is in a couple of weeks. Just let me check to see if there's one more question or something that I should be. I think no. I think we're okay for now. There was one comment about I haven't seen a Monkees album for a long time. Album cover forever. So that might be coming. That might be coming from you, David. I'm not sure. But thanks everybody for the questions and comments. We are trying to keep these as timely as possible and as useful for everybody as possible. So the scheduled next one was sticky behaviors. You know, like how do we take some of these things and actually make them stick, not regress. We may find that it's better, depending on the questions and comments, feedback we get from the audience, to talk about the challenge of denial, or the, you know, dealing with denial, almost those 2-level things, David, that you've mentioned. So we'll get back to you, the expert panelists, on what we will be talking about. Just maybe for a couple minutes, Viviana, if you were going to give everybody one kind of final tip on distance learning, or, you know, distance learning where related behavior change, you know, the people stuff. Could you, one or two tips, do's or don'ts to sort of leave everybody with?
I'll say first, try to keep your attention as much as possible. It is a challenge, but set up your space and make sure you're using your time wisely. Second of all, keep your mind on task and try to isolate what's happening when you're doing something that has risk or potential safety hazards for you.
Okay, all right. And Teg, any final comments just for everybody before we say goodbye?
Just again, I think it's been a fantastic conversation. We've been talking about what's the old quote? Necessity is the mother of invention, or something is the old quote, isn't it? And all Brits think it comes from Churchill, and all Americans probably think it comes from Mark Twain. But organizations have been through this learning curve now, and as organizations, there's a general feeling that we will come out better because of it. But we've been talking about, the importance of measuring effectiveness. There's lots of dynamics in play, people's different perception of risk. That's been a consistent theme. And as you're talking about denial now, that's a huge piece coming forward. The differences between driving change in a virtual and a sort of live environment than a classroom environment is completely different. People need to be aware of that. The importance of storytelling, again, has been, it's just a huge theme for me on this, and making sure that, the way we communicate with our people is clear. The infodemic thing, I'm gonna keep that for a long time, I think. But yeah, so all these different pieces, just fantastic conversation.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, thanks, Teg. And certainly one of the things that I've had 30 years of behavioral safety, and the first 15 years was all about coaching people how to talk to people about deliberate risk. When they're they know. Like when you see somebody with a mask covering their throat, they know, right? So I found my skills challenged yesterday. I did. I found, I went and talked to the big guy. I did. I went right up and I started a conversation, not about the mask that he wasn't wearing. No, I just started a conversation with him about it being good to get back in the gym and stuff like that. And during the conversation, I sensed that it would not be a good safety risk to go any further with this conversation. And so I bravely ran away. And I wonder how many other people will be bravely running away from intervening. Hopefully we can certainly give everybody some tools that'll work with their own coworkers. I'm not going to ever suggest that you try intervening with strangers any more than intervening with strangers and driving in traffic. It's not likely going to go well. But we do want to have some tools to deal with our coworkers and make this a positive win-win. And I think it will be a bit of a learning curve for everybody. At least that's what I felt yesterday. So there's lots more coming up, obviously. We'll let everybody know what the exact title is, maybe a bit of a combination of dealing with denial and the sticky behaviors. And maybe we can have some comments from all of you on both of those sort of themes, if you will. Again, for the audience, thank you all very, very much for attending and for listening in. We've had lots of great comments, and we really appreciate if you guys would give us some direction about what you want to hear 2 weeks from now. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great Memorial Day weekend, those of you in the States, and let's hope that with the partying and the alcohol, the whole social distancing thing just doesn't go to heck in a handbag. But that is one of the, well, seriously, it's one of my concerns, and that is, people, once they get partying, things tend to loosen up, right? And I think, I'm not sure, I'm sure I'm not the only one that's a little worried about what's going to happen this Memorial Day weekend. But anyhow,
tough to drink with a mask on. Very tough to drink.
Yeah.
They're having the Zoom parties now.
Say again, Ed. Sorry.
I said they're having those Zoom parties now, right?
Oh no, my kid.
Yeah.
But I totally get it. I said it sounds like a great excuse to drink alone. I don't really know if there's anybody on the other end of that line. It sounds like you're talking to other people, but it is anyhow. Yeah, I mean, amazing. I mean, like you said, it was the will, there's a way. People will party, that's for sure. And I do believe the younger generation will find a way to meet other people in the younger generation as we did as well too. So I'm not sure how social distancing is going to work with
And
all that.
we learned in Cincinnati last weekend that after 3 beers, 6 feet is actually only 4 inches. So that was our experience at the nightclubs that we got national press for. So that was great.
Yeah,
I'm very proud of my town last week.
yeah, well, that's what I'm worried about it all too. Anyhow, you guys, look, I'd stay and talk to you all forever. I really enjoy it. But we did try to say about an hour. So thank you all very much, and I'll circle back with you in a couple of days, see if you survive the weekend, okay, and we'll get ready for the next one. So thanks again, everybody.
Good.
Okay, all
Take
the best.
off. Take care.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
I know how to